Welcome, ladies. I am so thankful that you're taking time out of your busy day to spend some time this afternoon with me. I'm Kristen Carey, and I am going to share 4 keys to thriving after sexual betrayal. I have my amazing assistant, Janae, here. She is putting important stuff in the chat for you. There is a PDF that you can print. It is just some notes that you might want to fill in and take on what we're going to be talking about together today. And then also, if you haven't already seen, my husband Michael is doing a training for men tonight at 8 p.m. And it's 5 keys to quitting porn in 2021. Now, even if your husband's struggles have been an affair or other unwanted sexual behavior, the information Michael's going to share is still going to be really relevant and helpful. So I'd encourage you to check that out and share that link with your husband tonight. So I would love to see you guys as we give people a couple more minutes to file in. Share, if you don't mind, share in the chat just where you're from. If you don't want your name seen, some of you may have just registered with your first name. It will show your name, but no picture for privacy's sake. We value confidentiality and anonymity a lot. So anyways, we're so thankful that you guys are here. I'm going to start with the moment that I figured out that sexual betrayal was going to change my life forever. I was riding in the car back from registering for my baby shower with my husband at the time. And I had seen little random pieces of evidence for several weeks that something was not quite right, but he always had an explanation for it. And so I kind of brushed it off, but then I got this realization, oh my gosh, I could check the phone records for this time and this day when I knew something was kind of off, and maybe I'll get some more information. So I remember coming home and getting that information and it wrecking me completely and totally. Later that night, he confessed some more really serious sexual behavior that had occurred that I had no clue about. And that just demolished me. I felt like I went under the knife of unanesthetized open heart surgery. I was confused. I was shocked. Over the days and weeks ahead, I felt like I was on a freaking roller coaster, whiplash, just getting sucked underwater like I couldn't breathe, disoriented, in shock. I was traumatized. And ladies, it took me a long time to find the help that I needed and to feel normal again, to feel safe and stable again. And that is part of why my husband and I started our ministry 7 years ago. Our ministry is called Living Truth. We serve men with unwanted sexual behavior and women who are reeling from betrayal trauma. And so I am going to share some of the best keys that I have found over the years, not only of my own recovery work, but also in all the time that I have spent working with other women who are going through sexual betrayal. So the first key, well, and let me say this too, is that now more than ever, we need this type of support, encouragement, and information, because 2020, with the level of stress our world has been under, has seen a huge rise in porn use, in unwanted sexual behavior, and marriages blowing up. So if your discovery has been within the last year, you're not alone. This is something that is wrecking so many families, and we're just grieving with you, but we're also wanting to hold out a hand of hope to you, because it is not a hopeless journey, but it's a very treacherous and difficult journey. And that's why you're here, to get some support. So the first key, you ready? And this is in your PDF. It's stop the bleeding. Now you might say, well, I'm really not bleeding. Okay. I use a lot of analogies when I talk about sexual betrayal trauma recovery, because the reality is that though you can't see the effect of this on your body necessarily, what has happened to you has impacted you on every level. Sexual betrayal impacts us emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, sexually. Did I mention, is there a realm of life that I did not mention? It affects every area of our lives. And I like to use physical analogies to explain how it feels. And women tend to really resonate with that. One of those analogies is like, it's like you keep getting sucked under and you're in the middle of this roaring ocean of emotion, of pain, of all kinds of really overwhelming feelings. And periodically you just get sucked under and you can hardly breathe. And then you pop back up and get a breath, get a little bit of relief, only to get sucked under again. Another analogy that a lot of women really resonate with, and this one goes hand in hand with the whole stop the bleeding thing, is the idea that you're driving down the road in your car, minding your own business, and all of a sudden your husband's car crosses the midline of the highway and smashes into your car head on. That picture really resonates with a lot of women's discovery moment that this is happening in their marriage. So after that head-on collision, your car flips, your body gets thrown out of your vehicle, and you wind up waking up in a ditch. Like, what just happened? High levels of shock and disorientation, a lot of disorientation. Okay, what a lot of people want to do when they hear that you've had there's been an affair in your marriage, or that your husband's had a porn addiction, some of these types of things, what a lot of people want to do is tell you, okay, let's go to marriage counseling. Why don't you go to marriage counseling? And I'd love for you in the chat to just say me or marriage counseling if that was your situation. So you're finding out this is an issue, this is going on in your marriage, and the advice you're getting from family, friends, pastors, or even just your own advice that you think you need to do is marriage counseling. Let's go deal with the marriage problem. This is very, very common. And the analogy that I'd like to give for that is going to marriage counseling right away as your immediate, this is what needs to be done to solve this problem of sexual betrayal in the marriage, is like you wound up in that ditch after the car wreck, right? And the paramedics come and they see, oh, she's got a broken wrist. Like, we need to deal with that. We need to set that broken wrist. Okay, that's a problem. We do need to deal with the wrist. Meanwhile, you have a puncture wound in your back and you're bleeding out. Okay, so marriage counseling right after sexual betrayal as a first line of defense is like just dealing with the broken wrist and ignoring the puncture wound. So a good paramedic would know you need to search for life-threatening type situations first. The broken wrist is not going to kill you, but bleeding out will. And so with sexual betrayal, you need to stop the bleeding first. And here's what I mean by that. The first phase after discovery, we go through tons of shock, tons of physiological symptoms. Like if you've had trouble sleeping, eating, functioning, like find yourself bursting into tears at random moments, unable to think clearly, that is because your brain perceives sexual betrayal as traumatic, as something that is threatening to the fabric of your family, to the fabric of your life. God created us to be in this attachment relationship, this covenant relationship of marriage. And when it is disrupted, when we realize that there's been ongoing deception in that marriage, our brain instantly perceives it as a threat. And God wired us biologically for the amygdala, the primitive part of the brain, to sound the alarm, to shoot off adrenaline, cortisol, to get us into fight, flight, or freeze, so that we can deal with catastrophes. The problem, and that will work nicely if like your house is on fire and you need to escape and get your kids out, that adrenaline will give you what you need. But with something like relational trauma, like betrayal trauma, that has been ongoing and that the discovery usually goes on and on and on, is that it's like our brain is working in that high gear to survive, but that long-term effect of our brain being in high gear like that is really detrimental to our health. So the first and foremost thing that you need to stop the bleeding is to get yourself to a place of safety and stability. And there are many tools you can use to do that. I mean, one of those is to learn grounding strategies like a butterfly hug and some really deep diaphragmatic breathing to slow your heart rate down and to let your body and your brain know that, yes, you are in danger. You're in relational danger. You're in a horribly traumatic situation, but that you are not about to die. Some women even find repeating to themselves something like, there is not a tiger in the room. I am not being chased down by a gunman. Something to help remind their brains and their bodies that although it feels like they are in mortal danger, you're not in this very moment. Now, long-term, if we ignore sexual betrayal, or if we don't deal with the fallout, if we don't get STD tests, there are things that do make it life-threatening, which is why our brain is actually not betraying us, but we need help working through what are our next steps to get us to that place of safety and stability so that our body and our brain can function optimally. See, one of the problems with that fight, flight, or freeze reflex is that it shuts down the frontal lobe of your brain, which is where your logic, your impulse control, your clear thinking and decision-making takes place, which is why so many of us look and feel like a crazy person after betrayal happens. And then what happens is other people, including sometimes our husbands, look at us and they're like, whoa, no wonder he had an affair. Look at you, you're crazy. You're not crazy, you're traumatized. And until you feel safe enough in your situation to have some stability, your brain is going to continue to sound that alarm, and you are going to lose more and more of your true self, the part of you that can think clearly. If you have lived with chronic infidelity, this is going to take some time. But if you're recent in a discovery, there are some really simple things you can do to start to feel a little safer. I try not to give a lot of shoulds and real prescriptive answers of how to deal with these situations because everybody's different. But some women find some release from something as simple as having their husband sleep in another bedroom or move out of the house for a while. And there may be some push-pull with that. You might be afraid of, well, if he moves out, he's just going to go be with his affair partner. The reality is that you can't control what he does, and there's no way to secure that he is not going to do something like this again, whether he's in your house or not. So you really have to, it may sound or feel selfish, but you really have to think about the fact that you are in a compromised situation and your body and your brain are on fire, and you need to do whatever you can to calm that fire down, to signal to your body and to your brain that you are not in immediate mortal danger. Whatever can give you the assurance of that is going to be helpful in stopping that bleeding, so to speak. So one thing I think of is when you're on an airplane and the flight attendants tell you if there's a drop in pressure in the cabin, your oxygen mask will come down. Make sure you put that on first before you help the person next to you. But as Christian women, a lot of times we think that asking for what we want or need, like having our husband leave the bedroom, or asking him to watch our kids so that we can go to therapy, or asking him, can we spend this kind of money on therapy so that I can get help? We feel like that's selfish. And the reality is that it is not selfish to take good care of yourself. In the greatest commandment, Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, and will, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. But oftentimes as Christian women, we completely ignore the last part of that commandment, to love your neighbor as you love yourself. If some of us were to love other people the way we treat ourselves, it would not be loving. So I ask you this question, are you loving yourself? And what does that mean to love yourself? If you're unable to function, or if you are on high alert constantly, then doing things to get yourself to a place of calm and safety is going to be the most loving thing for you and for the people in your life, ultimately. Now, it's very tricky because healing happens in layers. And while the suggestions I made about finding some grounding strategies are one layer of healing, most of us find that we need some therapy, some good counseling to help us heal from the effect of the betrayal. There are forms of therapy out there such as EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing, that can really help calm and soothe the brain and help us after we are in a place of safety to be able to not remain traumatized by the betrayal. But it is really important to know that so many women who don't get help and support wind up with PTSD symptoms from the sexual betrayal. So that is my key number one, is stop the bleeding. Okay, key number two is tune into wisdom and block out ignorance. So I would ask you this: who are you getting your advice from? Who is helping you navigate this treacherous path of recovery from sexual betrayal? See, most of us, we would go for help with emotional or spiritual situations. We would go to our pastor or our Bible study leader. We might seek the help of a Christian counselor, and we would definitely go to our friends and our family, right? Well, with a situation like this, with sexual betrayal, what's so complicated about it is the fact that very few people really understand the true nature of affairs and of sexual addiction, if that's part of what you're dealing with. And it's tricky because you may not even know if that's what you're dealing with, because most people who are dealing with unwanted sexual behavior have so much shame about it that they're going to hide, deny, lie, even to themselves, about the seriousness of it. And unfortunately, even for counselors and certainly for pastors, when they go to school to get their training to do what they do, there is little to no training available about sexual addiction and the nature of sexual addiction. You have to go to specialized training for that. And yet pornography use and infidelity are so common right now that most people will say, oh yeah, we know what to do about that. So here's my advice to you guys. I got this from my dear friend Corey, who's on staff with our ministry. She says, if you're wondering whether to take advice from somebody, consider saying to them, I'm sorry, but I don't take advice from anybody who's not trained in sexual addiction and betrayal trauma. And you can also follow that up with a question. Are you trained in betrayal trauma? Do you understand this issue? What kind of training do you have? And I know that might feel a little in your face to ask somebody that, but I would liken it to just going to your best friend to ask for help when you figure out you have cancer. You would never do that. You would enlist the support of an oncologist, a specialist. But for some reason, because these sexual issues, we want to oversimplify or over-spiritualize them as, well, this is a spiritual issue only, like it's a moral issue only. The problem with that is that, see, God created our sexuality to be intertwined with every aspect of who we are. Think about it. Your sexuality is not just physical. It's not just moral. It's not even just sexual. Sexuality affects the brain. It affects the heart, the soul, the spirit. It is intertwined with every part of who we are, which is why it is so desperately painful when we experience sexual betrayal. So why would we go for a one-size-fits-all piece of wisdom or solution? Here's what I find happens, especially a lot of times in the church with this issue. Jeremiah 6:14 says, they dress the wounds of my people as though it were not serious. Peace, peace, they say, when there is no peace. And so this is unfortunately what happens a lot of times when we go to somebody that we trust in our church for help with this, is it's treated as a superficial wound when it's actually a mortal wound. Like it is an infection that is going to kill him, your husband, if he doesn't address his sexual addiction or his sexual integrity issues, and certainly can destroy a marriage. And so we cannot treat it with superficial Band-Aid approaches. We have to treat it on a comprehensive, multidimensional level, because that is how God created sex and sexuality. It is comprehensive, it is multidimensional. And unfortunately, because it's so misunderstood and so put in a box of just a moral issue only, there's always this assumption that you as the spouse must have played a role in why there has been infidelity or porn addiction in your marriage. So what happens is we go for help, and instead of help, we get blame. I'd like to hear in the chat if you've ever been blamed or questioned as being a part of why your husband has struggled. Like maybe you're not giving him enough sex. Maybe you're not sexy enough. Maybe you're not pretty enough. You don't have to say exactly what it was that people said to you. Oh my gosh, I could spend hours telling you guys the things that I've heard said to women. One of the saddest ones was after a woman's husband had had an affair. A counselor told her, you just need to open yourself up to your husband like a flower. Here she had been crushed. Their vows had been broken. And this counselor told her to put herself out there before him with no regard for her heart or what she was feeling. And ladies, the thing is, infidelity and sexual addiction, it is not about sex. I know that's confusing. You would think it was. But most of the time, especially when it's an addiction, they are attempting to medicate, and they have habituated their brain to a high level of dopamine and other chemicals that happen when they're chasing after a sexual high, which is what an affair or pornography do, is create a false sense of intimacy, a sexual high. It hijacks the brain's reward system. There's all kinds of biological reasons why they do it. It's not because you're not available enough or sexy enough. Now, do we all in the world, all of us have things to work on. All of us have things we need to grow in. But when you treat this situation like it's a marriage problem and you say, go get marriage counseling, remember, it's like putting your arm in a cast. Meanwhile, you're bleeding out. We have to deal with the betrayal trauma for you. And for him, he needs help dealing with his problematic sexual behavior from a specialist, somebody who knows what they're dealing with here. Really, really important. Okay. And so back to the second key, the excuse me, the tune into wisdom and block out ignorance. Blocking out anybody's voice who does not have training in betrayal trauma. And you would think you would want to listen to your husband tell you like why he did this. Very few men know really truly why they did this in the beginning. It takes months and possibly years of recovery for them to understand and have insight into the truth. They have been lying to themselves. They have been living the lie. So do not go to your husband and ask him to tell you the truth about you and who you are and what is and is not your fault and why he crossed the flesh line sexually or why he has chosen to divert his sexual energy to something other than you, because it all was supposed to be yours, ladies. And I'm just so sorry that this happened to you. But when you block out those voices of ignorance and you tune into wisdom, it can really eliminate a lot of the confusion and the noise in our heads, the constant rattling of the thoughts and the obsessive thinking over time. And so it takes a lot of discipline to rule out those other voices, but I think it's really important. Okay. I am going to get in here and share some slides with you guys. Okay. And actually this first slide I'm going to share with you guys is kind of wrapping up my key number 2. Okay. This is a picture of Mount Everest. And I really think there's a lot of analogies with trying to hike up Mount Everest and the journey from betrayal trauma into a life of post-traumatic growth, into a life of thriving. And I'm not saying that you can't do it. I really believe you can. And I really believe these 4 keys are like probably the 4 most important things that we need to do to be able to thrive again. But nobody would attempt to hike Mount Everest by themselves or without tons of support and conditioning. And nobody would try to do it without a guide. But yet we try to navigate this path of sexual betrayal trauma recovery alone and without a guide. So I don't know if you guys know what a Sherpa is. It's a term it both means a people group that is native to the area right around Mount Everest, but it has also come to mean a person that you would hire who would be your guide in climbing Mount Everest. And be the person who would carry your oxygen tanks and help you carry extra food and show you where that ice fall is and tell you, hey, don't step there. There's been a lot of avalanches here. And they would say, okay, this is where we're going to camp for the night. Here's how much food we need to conserve for the journey. That Sherpa is your guide. And so what I want to ask you is, and if you could write this down on your paper, who is your Sherpa, or who are your Sherpas on the journey? Now notice a Sherpa is somebody who's native to the region, and they will have climbed the mountain many times before you. So it's not somebody standing at the bottom being like, yeah, I heard you should watch out for that, and I think you should do this. It's somebody who walks with you on the journey, and it's somebody who's been there, who's walked on that path before you. Okay, the next key number 3 is fly in formation. Oh, wait, you guys, I'm sorry. I have to do this. This picture actually is goes with key number 2. This is part of why it's so difficult to figure out who to talk to for help, and why so many of us get further wounded when we go to well-meaning family, friends, spiritual leaders to try to get help. This is from Brenda, one of my co-leaders in the betrayal trauma recovery groups that I've led. Brenda says, betrayal is such a personal, private, lonely journey, and it's easy to stay isolated, especially if you told someone who judged you or someone who couldn't handle your situation. That's pretty common. Sometimes our friends can't handle what's going on. Others haven't walked that path and they don't really understand, which points right back to that whole idea of why we need a Sherpa, somebody who's been on that path ahead of us, who can be there for us through the pain. Okay, key number 3 is fly in formation. So this is a picture of a flock of geese flying in formation. And this idea, this concept, and even this slide was taken from my dear friend Heather, another co-leader in my betrayal trauma recovery groups, who gave an amazing talk called Isolation versus Flying in Formation at one of our betrayal trauma recovery meetings this fall. And at first, it made me shudder because, ladies, I have had multiple traumatic encounters with geese. One time, this was when I was a single mom. My son was 3 years old. I had him in the baby jogger and I was running. I had my AirPods in, or earbuds. There were no AirPods back then. I had my earbuds in, so I couldn't hear anything. And all of a sudden, I'm just running along, minding my own business. And I feel this bam in the back of my head. And I turn around and it is a goose, full wingspan, like, like making like pterodactyl noises, like super scary. Have you ever been close to a goose when their wings are like extended? They're huge. They're massive. It was super scary. Apparently, we must have gotten a little too close to that goose's egg. Never mess with a mama goose. Okay. And then after she got me, she started doing a nosedive to try to attack my baby. And I was like, So I flipped his jogger, the baby jogger, over. Fortunately, he was strapped in, so he was like hanging, suspended in his baby jogger. It was super scary. Such an attack came this close to happening one other time, I think a year later. Only this time I didn't have earbuds in, so I saw it coming and I was able to run away fast enough. Oh my gosh. So I've never been a fan of geese ever since then, until I heard Heather's talk, Isolation versus Flying in Formation, this past October. And the things that she shared about geese were really inspiring to me and encouraging. For example, did you know that the reason geese fly like this is because the geese in the back get 70% more lift and power. They have, they use 70% less energy and effort to fly than the ones in the front. And so the stronger ones are the ones that are in the front, and they may rotate and take turns. But it's pretty incredible that when you fly in formation instead of flying alone, you get a way more energy, way more power, way more lift. And this is not unlike how we are as humans. I mean, God created us for relationship. He created us for connection. But betrayal trauma disrupts that most important connection with our spouse. Then we go to people for help some of which don't know what to do about us, some of which blame us. And as we get wounded, we tend to isolate more and more and more. And that is exactly the opposite of what we need. But sometimes it's just that we're not flying in formation with the right people. One other interesting fact about geese that I learned from Heather is that when one goose in this formation gets injured or sick, 2 other geese fly out of formation with the sick or injured goose, and they go down together. And those 2 geese stay with the injured goose until it gets well again or until it dies, before they rejoin their flock or find a new flock to join. They do not fly alone, and they do not allow one of their flock to go down without caring for it, which reminds me so much of how powerful it is to be in a situation where you are safe to address your betrayal trauma, and you are getting that lift by staying with a flock of other people who know what this is like and who've gone and successfully navigated the path before you. On my journey, I had some incredibly safe friends that I was blessed with, but it wasn't until I got into a group that my therapist led for other women who'd gone through sexual betrayal that I felt like, oh my gosh, like these people really get my pain. It was very powerful. And I'm going to read a quote to you guys from my friend Jen. This is on our Living Truth podcast, but Jen is another co-leader in the betrayal trauma recovery groups that I've led. Jen says, I love facilitating groups of women, ensuring that each one can share their heart, that each woman knows they have a voice. I lost my voice after betrayal. I lost who I was. I didn't know what I needed. Making sure each woman in group is heard and has a voice to process their pain and emotion. I love helping them know that whatever they are feeling, it's real, it's normal, it's valid, and it's okay. I love hearing her heart for this. Excuse me a second. Because when you realize you're not alone, you're not the only one, that you're not crazy, that what you're feeling is just a signal. I mean, God created emotions as a signal to us. Pay attention to this. But when we have to squelch them because they're so intense, or because we are so drained because we're trying to fly in isolation, we don't have any energy to address our feelings, then we're not going to process those feelings, and it's going to get stuck inside of our bodies. Okay, I've got my last key here, ladies. So we've got stop the bleeding or get safe and deal with the real issue, which is your betrayal trauma, not the marriage initially. Number 2, which is tune into wisdom and block out the voices of ignorance. And then number 3 is fly information. We've got number 4 now. Number 4 is get empowered. And what that means is to do the work that only you can do to recover. And this can only be done when you're safe. So the keys do build on themselves. So if you had gotten into that car wreck, your first step would be to deal with the bleeding and go to the emergency room, evaluate everything that's going on, and deal with the emergency level care. Eventually, you would probably need to go to physical therapy or occupational therapy, and it would be your job to keep up with the exercises, to make it to your appointments. And even though it sucks that you've gone through sexual betrayal and that you find yourself here and it's not what you signed up for and it was not your fault, you are not powerless over what you do next. You're powerless over the fact that it happened to you, and you do need to grieve that, but you're not powerless over what your next steps are. And the only way you can get through this kind of pain and this kind of agony and situation is to go through it. There's no way around it. So the pain can come in waves. So my question for you is, do you have the freedom? Do you have the luxury of grieving? Like, are you safe enough that you can move into the aspect of grieving or addressing some of the deeper root issues that this has tried to demolish your life with? For example, a lot of us start believing a lot of lies after sexual betrayal happens. And Katie is a brave woman who is no different. She experienced a whole lot of lies. And I'm going to read this quote from her for you guys. And then I'm going to share some paintings that her daughter made. Katie says, these pictures represent a journey. At the time of my discovery, I found that I was unable to manage many of my emotions and thought patterns. I knew some of it was unhealthy, but I just could not move past it. Feelings of worthlessness, the inevitability of pain, and the ever-present thought that I am unlovable, even to God, were a constant daily thread in my mind. One day it was suggested to me that our inner life is like a garden. If lies are planted in your garden and you let them take root and grow for years, they will become massive and choke out everything else that tries to grow. Uprooting those lies is a lot of work. It's not just pulling weeds. It's more like chopping down trees. It takes considerable time and effort, intentionality, and the right tools. But if you stick with it, you can bring them to the ground and eventually new life will grow. Truth can grow. So I asked my daughter to paint. Oh my gosh, my picture is covering, so I cannot see what it says underneath that. Let me look at my notes here. I asked my daughter to paint that concept. These paintings are hanging on the wall in my home as a constant reminder to be intentional about what I allow to be planted. What will I allow to take root? And what kind of garden do I want to live in? So here's the pictures, you guys. This is Katie's before picture, like how her brain, her body, her mind, her heart felt right after her betrayal when the lies were just getting huge. And it was like this barren wasteland. And it's been a year and a half now since Katie's initial discovery, and her life and her marriage have been restored. And it's been an incredible journey. But even probably a year ago or so, she had her daughter paint this to represent how the garden of her life had been flourishing ever since she had really dealt with some of those inner lies that she was believing. So ladies, let me ask you this. Which one of these represents more of how your life is feeling right now? Is it a barren wasteland? Or is it a flourishing garden? But most of us can't get to the flourishing garden without support, without help. It's really tricky because a lot of times we get stuck and we don't know what we need to do next. We don't know who to take advice from, who to get help from, what lies to address, what our next step is. I don't think anybody should have to walk this journey alone. But there is something that only you can do to take action, and that would be to figure out where you want to get the help that you need. I want to tell you, my husband and I started our ministry, Living Truth, 7 years ago. And over the past 7 years, we've worked with hundreds of men and women. My husband working with men recovering from unwanted sexual behavior, and me working with women recovering from sexual betrayal trauma. And it has been an amazing journey. I mean, lots of women's marriages don't make it, but they do, and they flourish, and they thrive. And it can take time. It can take the right guidance and support. So I ask you, do you have the right guidance and support in your life? Because right now, we are launching a brand new community called the Living Truth Together community. And that is comprised of men in the battle, for men who are wanting to be free from unwanted sexual behavior, and women in the battle, which is for women recovering from betrayal trauma. And we would be beyond honored for you guys to join us on your journey from betrayal trauma into a life of thriving and purpose. Now, I believe these 4 keys that I've shared with you are really crucial. And all 4 of these keys are incorporated into the brand new curriculum that my husband and I have just created. So the curriculum I've been working on for the last several months is short videos, because we know that when you're traumatized, it can be really, really hard to tune in, to read a book, to stay focused. I mean, and there's a lot of information out there now about how to recover from sexual betrayal or about sex addiction, but it's really hard to know which voice to listen to, what you need to do next. So do you have a Sherpa? Because if you don't, we would love for you to join us. to be a Sherpa on your journey. And Janae has put up more information about Women in the Battle. If you stick with us for a few more minutes, I am going to give you, for those of you who stay on live, I'm going to give you a 20% off coupon code if you'd like to join us. What you get with a Women in the Battle membership, you get a 90-minute recovery group once a week led by certified peer facilitators. You get custom curriculum, 6 months. It's a 6-month program. So there's videos, there's worksheets, there's assessments that you take, and it guides you on this path. I'm going to show you guys back to my slides here. This is the journey that I take women on, okay? Starts down here at this point of safety. And we take you through to stabilization, to reconstructing your life, to further illumination for more healing, to deeper healing, into transformation, into a life of post-traumatic growth. And this is a journey I've been helping women with for many years, but we have taken all that we've learned and put it into this 6-month course, coupled with these small groups and our own private social networking, where there's now 65 women who have the ability to put a profile up to explain a little bit of their story, to meet other women, and it's secure. It's only other women who are going through sexual betrayal. So there's a forum and a place to get the connection that you need, to find women who've gone through similar situations to you. And so for those of you who are still with me, I want to give you guys that 20% off coupon code. And it is Stay On 20. So STAYON 20. This can only be used through the end of the day tomorrow, January 7th. And so if you are wanting to join with us, if you need support, if you're tired of walking this journey alone and shooting in the dark, like you are tired of trying to figure out what your next step is, and you're tired of flying solo and you want to fly in formation, here's what we call Women in the Battle. Wait for it. We call it the best place you never wanted to be. I mean, you did not sign up for sexual betrayal. You didn't get married thinking, oh yeah, let me get my heart stomped on and wrecked. But here you are. And you're powerless over this having happened, but you are not powerless over what you do next. And so let me ask you this. What have you invested in yourself to get the healing that you need, to get the guidance that you need? What have you done in terms of time and money and energy? What have you spent? What does this cost you? What I believe is that none of us can walk this path alone. God created us for connection, and yet with a trauma as disruptive to the marriage connection as sexual betrayal, it can be so difficult to know where to turn for help. Now, I don't claim to have all the answers, but I am here to answer your questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to start loading those in the chat. Couple other things I want to tell you guys about that we have involved with the Women in the Battle membership. One is a monthly Q&A, live Q&A with either my husband or myself. So like maybe you have questions that are more appropriate, like asked to a man who's walked through sexual betrayal or who's had a sexual addiction himself. And my husband, Michael, is hosting a live Q&A with the women in my membership every other month. I am on doing Q&A on the off month. So every month you have access to a 1-hour live Q&A session with either my husband or myself. We also are teaching you some really powerful inner healing tools. Every month there's curriculum that you watch about that inner healing tool. And let me give you an example of an inner healing tool. Excuse me. The Emmanuel Approach by Dr. Carl Lehman and Dr. James Wilder, which is an incredible way of helping your brain turn on the relational circuits, increase your sense of joy and gratitude, and experience encounters with Jesus. And so we teach you about the theory and the practice of how to use these inner healing tools. And then we have a live session where we put that into practice in small groups. So there is so much packed into this experience. And what women have said, you can look at that, the button that my lovely Janae put up, the yes, I want the clarity, connection to heal from sexual betrayal. And it explains a lot of what other women have said about their experience in Women in the Battle, which has been absolutely priceless. So I am going to go over to the chat and look. Will these topics be discussed tonight? Michael has a separate training for the men. It's all about their problem, right? But here's what's really cool and what's so powerful about Men in the Battle and Women in the Battle. Although these are two separate programs, my husband and I run them, and we have a lot of overlap and a lot of what we call partner sensitive approach. So a partner sensitive approach means that when Michael is teaching the guys, he is teaching them, and I am teaching them about how unsafe you feel, about the trauma that you feel. And it really does help increase men's empathy towards their wives when they start to understand more, and especially when they hear it from another man. Also, when they hear it from me as an objective source. So the congruence of the messaging that we have in our two separate communities can really be beneficial to the marriage where both parties are willing to work on their issues. Now, if your husband is not willing to own that he has a problem or deal with his issues, nothing can be done about that except to pray for him. But in terms of what will be discussed tonight, it'll be mostly, the training tonight with the men is mostly focused on their problem, which right now would be their unwanted sexual behavior. Because let's face it, they can't help you feel safe if they're going to keep acting out, right? So we got to put the cart before the horse. Or wait. No, we can't put the cart before the horse. We got to have the horse be in the front. Is the men's group open for sign up? It absolutely is, Shannon. And if you guys, Janae, can you put wib@living-truth.org in the chat? This is an email. You can directly email me here, wib@living-truth.org, and I will gladly share the page where your husband could, if he's just ready to go for it, to go do the sign up right now, he can. But Michael will also be unpacking his membership, what all it involves tonight when he's speaking with the men at 8 o'clock. So let's see, what other questions? I missed yesterday's session and a little bit of this one. Can we go back and watch them? Yes, Michelle. We have recorded these sessions, and you will get the replay in like 72 hours, I believe, or 48 hours. I can't remember. So the coupon code, though, is only available till the end of the day tomorrow, like 11:59 p.m. Eastern time, tomorrow, the 7th. And so I wouldn't wait for the replay. And I'm going to give you that code again because you guys are here. You get it. It's stay on 20. So all caps, STAYON 20. But you will also get a recording. Okay. Tanika says, the husband you're with now is the one that betrayed you. Good question. I didn't share my whole story with you guys just for the sake of time. But scroll back to 2004 when I told you guys about my big discovery. That was the first of many discoveries. And that marriage ended in divorce about a year and a half later. So I actually went through the horrible pain and trauma of becoming a single mother. And so I remarried in 2000. So I divorced in 2006. I remarried in 2010. And so, yeah, good question. Let's see. Eva's asking, do the betrayed men get to understand the betrayal trauma? Oh my gosh, such a good question. So here's the thing. When a man is acting out, especially with things like pornography, it shuts down the part of his brain responsible for empathy, which is part of why you might feel like he does not get me, he doesn't understand, he doesn't care. Now, the brain can heal. God made our brains this wonderfully complex and amazing organ. And so if he stops acting out and he starts renewing his mind and working on it and healing his brain and the pathways in his brain that he has hijacked with his sexual acting out, then he can start to understand the betrayal trauma. But it's extremely rare that they understand it in the beginning. They need to really deal with and address their sexual behavior first, and then they can learn empathy. And that is something that we work on helping men understand and teaching them. I will also tell you something really powerful that we've done every year is a group of us from Women in the Battle who are leaders will go and we answer questions that the men ask. In fact, if you're interested in hearing some of that, go to our website, living-truth.org, and you'll see a link for the podcast at the top. And there is a 3-part series of podcasts where me, Corey, and Julie, 2 of my colleagues, answer questions, real life questions that men ask about sexual betrayal, about their experience, about their wife. And we answer those questions, and it's very eye-opening for those men to be able to hear from a woman's perspective. Okay, next is Blakely. The question you mentioned, we should ask our husbands, what if their answers are, I don't know, because of dissociation? Oh my gosh, really good question. So are you referring to, I think you're probably referring to questions about what their sexual behavior has been. Many of them are dissociative when they're doing their sexual behaviors. They are doing it to medicate. They are doing it to avoid pain, to avoid feelings of worthlessness. The thing is, the brain can recover. And while they may not remember whether the affair started in April or May, with therapeutic support, men can recover the important things that we need to know, like how long was this going on? They do an incredible job of lying to themselves and minimizing the severity of what's happened in their own mind. One of the really important therapeutic processes that we recommend for couples that want to go through this is a therapeutic disclosure and polygraph. And so it can take some time for their memory to come back, and it takes therapeutic support or work with a really good coach to start to go through and figure out kind of the roadmap of how did I get here? How did this happen? It is possible to do that, number one. And number two, it is possible for you as the spouse to really know that you have the truth, that you have the full scope of what has happened. Like, you may not know, has he looked at porn 50 times or 60 times in the last year? But does that really matter? For most of us, it's the bigger things like, when did this start? When did this affair start? There's, anytime you have graphic questions, you have to ask yourself, what is the question behind the question? What am I really looking for? Most of us are seeking safety, and we're seeking understanding. And most of us find that we can get that to some degree. Understanding is not something I'm going to guarantee fully, because any addiction, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, porn addiction, is cunning, powerful, and baffling. And any addiction, there's a degree to which it completely defies logic. So I hope I answered your question, Blakely. Please post another one if you have another one. Another question from Blakely is, do you both sign up, or is it one membership? 2 separate memberships. We have invested thousands of dollars into building completely separate websites for the sake of confidentiality, anonymity, and security. So the men have their own private social network with just other men recovering from sexual addiction or unwanted sexual behavior. And the women have their own whole separate private forum so that there's no crossover. So the reason they are connected is because my husband and I both lead them, and we have a lot of couples involved with our leadership who have worked both separate programs. Our next goal is to start a program for couples. But anybody who wants to go through the program for couples, the prerequisite is going to go through the individual Men in the Battle and Women in the Battle. Because what we find is that there's some really specific and distinct things that each person, each member of the coupleship needs. So the sign up is completely separate, Blakely. My sign up is here in this window. Michael will be sharing his sign up tonight. However, If for whatever reason your husband can't make it to the training and you want the men's sign up, just email me at wib@living-truth.org, and I will directly send you the sign up for the men's membership. But the price is the same for the men's and the women's. Oh, and the price is listed on the page, but it is $97 a month for those 4 90-minute small groups, once a month live Q&A, once a month live inner healing session, all the curriculum, and the private social networking. Okay, Eva says, do you guys work on disclosure for couples? We've done dozens and dozens of them. However, my husband and I have put all of our work with private work, like with couples, doing mentoring and doing disclosures and polygraphs and all of that. We've put it on hold as we have sensed God calling us to put all of the knowledge and experience and all the things that we've learned. He's given us this vision to put it all in video form and worksheets and to create this whole program so that more people could get help, because we could only help like one couple at a time when we would do disclosures. However, Eva, I have lots of other recommendations depending on where you live for a disclosure and a polygraph process. So I can make those recommendations. Again, email me, reach out to me one-on-one, and I will help you with that. How do husbands sign up for tonight? Janae, can you go ahead and put the link to Michael's training tonight in the chat? That would be great. Aretha says, does the fee cover both spouses? It does not, because these are separate programs. It is a separate, it's billed separately. It is, you sign up on separate pages. There are many couples where, maybe he's not interested in recovery, and so she's the only one working a program. I will say also that we do offer scholarships. So if you would like to join, but you do not have the finances, you'll find a link to fill out our scholarship form. I recommend after you fill it out that you email me at wib@living-truth.org to inquire about whether you've qualified for scholarship or not. Let's see. Is polygraph necessary? Well, that's a good question, Sylvia. Did I skip a question? I think I got them. Well, Janae, you'll help me at the end if I skipped anybody. Okay. It's only available if you want it and need it. It is not necessary. But I will say that the pending polygraph really has a way of encouraging men to relinquish those last little bits of secrets that they're wanting to hold on to. Now, I've seen couples go through recovery without a polygraph and it go well for them. But honestly, the polygraph is the reason it's so powerful. It's just a gift to the partner, to the spouse, to give them the reassurance, like there's no more secrets. I know everything. And lots of couples who go through a polygraph and disclosure, by the way, do not send your husband to just go polygraph on your own. Don't go rogue with this. It should be used in a therapeutic context with support, because there's lots of nuances and ins and outs of how it works. But it can give a wife just a tremendous gift. In fact, some wives love it so much, they ask their husband to go quarterly for the first year and then annually thereafter. And then you never have to wonder. You never have to try to rely on your intuition or your detective skills again, because the polygraph don't lie. So it's a gift for a lot of women. Blakely said, before we were married, your husband's addiction started before you were married, and it's escalated from porn to physical affairs and severe dissociation. A lot of the big details he remembers, but the reasonings behind it are usually, I don't know. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, the reasons behind it may not be because he's dissociative, but because he doesn't have the insight and the awareness as to why he did this. But if he had severe physical abuse or sexual abuse as a child, it's not uncommon for people to be dissociative. And what he's going to really need is some good therapy to deal with that dissociation. Okay, Maureen. Thank you, Maureen. Maureen says the fee is amazing for what you get. Therapy for 1 hour is way more money. Yeah, therapy for an hour is about $125 typically. I mean, it depends on where you live and your therapist. So yeah, to get 4 groups 2 live sessions, 1 Q&A, 1 inner healing, all the curriculum, and the private network for $97 a month is really reasonable. Thank you, Maureen, for chiming in on that. Is it possible that my husband's betrayal could be linked to his sexual abuse as a child? Yes, absolutely. Most men, there are statistics out there. I think it's upwards of 80% of men with a sexual addiction have had some kind of sexual trauma as children, some kind of sexual abuse or something in that realm. That is why it's so imperative for men to get help, to get therapy. Now, that's no excuse for him to continue acting out, right? But he does need, and he needs to heal the trauma behind it. But yes, that is absolutely possible. There's a link there. And then Blakely, when doing a polygraph, does the betrayed spouse usually ask the questions or a therapist, or how does that work? Give me 1 sec. You guys ask great questions, by the way. Okay. So the spouse works with the therapist, coach, or the person assisting with the process. And usually we give suggested questions and you choose from them. One thing about polygraph is you cannot polygraph intent or vague questions that are not measurable, yes or no. For example, you cannot ask, do you still love your ex-affair partner? You cannot ask, like, have you fantasized about your affair partner? Because it's something that happens in the mind or in the heart. So it's got to be black and white. Like, have you had sex with your affair partner since April 15th? That's a very black and white yes, no question. That is an example of a question that can be polygraphed. But it's important to include a disclosure with a polygraph for multiple reasons. So, but the partner is the one who's primarily going to be thinking through what it is that they want to know. And so largely will be shaping those questions. Tracy says, many people say a polygraph can be manipulated, and my husband is afraid of them for fear of being framed. Yeah, I understand there's, some controversy. These are not criminal polygraphs. And also, if you're old enough to remember watching Meet the Parents, it's not like Robert De Niro in the basement. It's different. So Tracy, there are articles out there that explain how polygraph can be used in a therapeutic context and why they are highly effective. So the technology of them has gotten really good over the last couple of years. And when you use them in an appropriate context, they are highly effective. So another question tonight, is it discussed that this addiction is a mortal wound and medicating a deeper issue? You know what's funny, you guys, is I am certain that my husband will talk about the deeper issues. I don't know that he'll use the term mortal wound or the verse from Jeremiah, but he will talk about the deeper issues of wanting to medicate pain for sure. Jill says, my husband doesn't want to go for another polygraph because of the trauma it put him through the first time. We had a second polygraph after I discovered a slip 7 months after the first. I went with him to the session, and this time the polygrapher took me was actually super helpful. He was a man that truly understood what empathy is, something my husband still seems to not completely understand, or at least how to respond when I need it. Oh my gosh, Jill, that sounds so difficult. I am so sorry. I'm not sure if you had a question for me. It seemed more like a statement, but if you do have a question, please put it in the chat and I'm happy to answer it. Frankie says, I would fear the polygraph because the addictive nature includes manipulation, and manipulating the polygraph would be easier for them. Well, there are a lot of other factors besides a polygraph that a good therapist or coach can help you, and even in our curriculum, can help you look for manipulative behavior. Not every sexual addict or person who's had affairs is actually actively still going to want to try to manipulate you. If they are humble, open, broken, and willing, if you see those attitudes in them, it is possible for them to get free, to get well, to become truthful and honest again. But I have found polygraphs to be really effective, even for people who are manipulative that try to get out of it. Beth says, are there mandatory reporting issues even if poly is not criminal for full disclosure? Well, I live in the state of Indiana. In the state of Indiana, everybody is a mandatory reporter. So if there's been any kind of underage or child pornography or abuse of any kind, then everybody is a mandatory reporter, even like Sunday school teachers. So it depends on your state. Sylvia says, my therapist is training on sexual betrayal and porn sexual addiction. However, he suggested not a polygraph is needed because I need to start working on trusting my husband again. Disclosure has been discussed too, but also there is something inside me that I don't want to know all the details. I think it's going to be so hard to forget everything if I know, and I don't know if this is normal. Yes, Sylvia, that is the level of details that you find out from a disclosure is really up to the spouse. What I personally recommend is, what do you need to know? Like, do you want to know if this started 30 years ago when you first got married, or did it start 25 years ago after the birth of your first child? That is not a graphic detail. Usually what I recommend partners get is just information, and to know that you know the truth and that there's no more lies and secrets out there. But it's really a personal, an individual decision. And so if you don't want it, there's nothing wrong with that. I just want you to know you do have the option of asking for a disclosure without it being graphic details. Graphic details like what color laundry was she wearing? Was she wearing a thong, etc.? Those types of details get burned into your brain and do re-traumatize us. Kathy says, would the sexual abuse also be the reason for his emotional dissociation? Yes, that can absolutely cause dissociation. And yeah, he will definitely need help for that. So ladies, I think that's all the questions I have. It's been just amazing being able to sit with you guys in this really painful topic, but it's a sacred place to be able to come together and receive the help and support that you need. So you will get this replay. Really hope to see you guys in our Women in the Battle membership, where you can fly in formation instead of flying solo, where you can listen to the voices of wisdom, where you can get the hope and the clarity that you need. So I'm going to sign off, but feel free to email me if you have any other further questions. Take care.